Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey Through Sonship podcast. I am Calvin Calhoun Jr., and today we want to wrap up our Heart of David series and talking about the honor of David. The honor of David. This is probably one of the absolute most important aspects of David that we especially in the Western world, United States, and all these countries in the West, can really learn from. Okay, that we really actually need to adopt, and that's the honor of David. Okay, let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 31. Okay, for those who've been following us, we know we've been talking about how David was twice in Saul's presence. Did Saul try to kill David? We said that's a picture of the institutionalized church, those who seek control over the people of God, institutionalized, denominationalized churches who seeks to control the people of God by keeping power to themselves. They would try to kill or try to snuff out the sons of God that carry the grace of God, because the grace of God is so attractive to the people. And we see that the people were attracted to David because when David would go out, David would win his battles, and David would come back, and the people would see David. And that's a wonderful thing. David had a relationship with the people. Now, he did not allow the applause of people to affect how he moved and how he did things. He knew he was under the grace of God. He knew what he was doing was in the name of the Lord. But Saul used him to try to continue to keep control of his kingdom. But when he started seeing the people were flocking to David, that enraged him, that made him mad, and to the point that he wanted to kill David, because he knew it was only a matter of time, that the only thing left once he has the people is to take the throne. Okay, but David, in his meekness and in his submission and his authority, never tried to overthrow Saul. He never tried to overthrow Saul. God gave David a wonderful brother in Jonathan, who was Saul's son. Okay, and Saul's son spoke up for David on his behalf when David was running from Saul. He would confront him multiple times and tell Saul, would the king shed innocent blood? What has David done to deserve the wrath of the king? And of course, Saul tried to kill Jonathan once, because Saul, the evil spirit within on Saul, said that you sided with this rebellious boy. I'm sorry, you're the son of a rebellious woman. So he talked about his mama, and then he calls him and tells him that he sided with the son of Jesse. So he seemed to know who David was then, when he was in anger and in rage, and he tried to kill him. So Jonathan, throughout this time, I'm talking about from 1 Samuel, I believe it's 18 or 19, all the way to 1 Samuel 30, is the journey of how David ran from Saul, how Jonathan would assist David from escaping from the wrath of Saul. There was a time when Saul came into a cave where David was actually hiding. And David had the opportunity, listen to me, he had the opportunity to kill Saul. He absolutely did. And the servants that were with him said, this is our opportunity, we could kill him. And David said, no, we should not touch the Lord's anointed. David, that was also the spirit of meekness, the spirit of submission to authority. David understood that Saul was the sitting king. Though the spirit of the Lord was upon David, David understood that he would not take the throne by shedding blood. He would not take the throne by the shedding of blood. So ultimately, one of the things that we need to understand, as Saul is running around here chasing David all day long, what about the real enemy? What about the Philistines? When you read the story, did you ever think that, man, Saul was so enraged, so mad, so concerned with keeping control of his kingdom, that he lost sight of the actual enemy? Let me say that again. Saul was so enraged on trying to snuff out David to maintain control of a kingdom that really don't even belong to him. Because the people of God don't belong to a king. They belong to God. But he was trying to keep control so much that he chased David wherever he went. He said, oh, we'll go there. Oh, I heard he's there. We'll go there. That he lost sight of the real enemy of Israel, and that was the Philistines. And guess what the Philistines started doing? They started moving in. So let's look at First Samuel, because we're going to advance this story a whole lot faster, okay? First Samuel, chapter 31. It says, now the Philistines, now this is after he's still chasing David all over the place. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. And the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. Now, who was not there? Why were they losing the wars? Who should have been the head? It should have been David, because David had the Spirit of the Lord upon him. His victory was going to be assured because he would come in the name of the Lord. But now they fought by their own strength. Now there wasn't no Goliath now. They fought the armies of the Philistines, and this time look what happens. It says, and the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines killed or slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchusha, Saul's sons. So all three of Saul's sons was killed by the Philistines at this point. They killed Jonathan, Abinadab, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, Malchishua, okay? And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Then said Saul unto his armor bearer, draw thy sword, and thrust me through therewith. These uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor bearer would not, for he was sore afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. Okay. Killed himself. That's what it says. Okay. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell likewise upon his sword and died with him. So Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. And when the men of Israel that were on the other side of the valley, and they that were on the other side of Jordan, saw that the men of Israel fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them, the promised cities of Israel. Because the king was so concerned with the wrong thing, lost vision of the true enemy, the enemy now has come in and taken cities that were promised to Israel because the leadership was wayward. And this is a beautiful picture of what happens when you lose vision trying to keep control of something that really does not belong to you. The people of God are not a commodity. The people of God are the sons of God. They belong to the Father. And you have a responsibility to watch for them, to rule wisely, to help bring them to maturity. And when you lose focus on that mission, on that objective, do you know what happens? And you go chasing after people and trying to rebuke people who the grace of God is actually on. Do you realize now that grievous wolves come in and ravage the flock? This is exactly what happened to Israel. Exactly what happened, because Saul lost control of himself. He was chasing after the wrong thing, and of course the Philistines would come in and take those cities. It says, and it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons falling in Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. And they took their bones and buried them there under a tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Okay, so they retrieved the body of Saul and his 3 sons. And the Philistines were a brutal group. They They took the bodies of them and put them on a wall as like a trophy for the idols of their gods. Now, fast forward. Young man comes to David and tells him that Saul is dead. Okay? Let's go to the book of 2 Samuel. Okay? And then it says, and let's go down to verse number 6. It says, and the young man, and David, verse 5, and David said unto the young man, back up verse 4, And David said unto him, how went the matter? I pray thee, tell me. And he answered, that the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan his son are dead also. And David said unto the young man that told him, how knowest thou that Saul and Jonathan his son be dead? And the young man that told him said, as I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned on his spear, and lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me, and called unto me. And I answered, here I am. And he said unto me, who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. He said unto me again, stand, I pray thee, upon me, and slay me, for anguish is come upon me, because my life is yet whole in me. So I stood upon him and slew him, because I was sure that he could not live after he was fallen. And I took the crown that was upon his head, and the bracelet that was on his arm, and have brought them hither unto my Lord. Then David took hold of his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him. Now watch David. The same man that hunted him like a dog, tried to kill him twice in his presence, could have killed him in a cave, still didn't do it. Watch what David does. And they mourned and wept and fasted, even for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword. David mourned the death of Saul, Jonathan, and his sons. He mourned the death. Okay? Now, it says this, and David said unto the young man that told him, whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. Now remember, it was the Amalekite young man. So he found Saul. He fell on his spear. He wasn't dead yet. The Amalekite comes around. He says, kill me, please. The Amalekite said, well, I see you're going to die anyway. So yeah, I'll do it for you. And he kills him. All right. So here we go. And David said unto the young man, verse 13, that told him, whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. And David said unto him, how was thou not afraid to stretch forth thy hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? He still calls Saul the Lord's anointed. Watch this. And David called one of the young men and said, go near and fall upon him. And he smote him that he died. David killed the young man. It says, and David said unto him, thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth has testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. Okay, he considered Saul to be Saul's anointed, as Saul was sitting on the throne. Okay, and David lamented. Now this is still the honor of David. It says, and David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan his son, and he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. Now, of course, right now, this guy tell you, you're going to be like, what is the book of Jasher? Jasher is one of the books that was not included in the 66 canons. I actually do have the book of Jasher, but that we could talk about that for a whole nother podcast. But he teaches them to mourn the loss, have the nation mourn the loss of Saul. Okay? Though they clamored for David, David told the nation, you need to mourn the loss of your king. That's respect. That's honor. He could either say, oh, well, Saul's gone, let's go. No, David was sad. He wept. And also keep in mind, there was a covenant relationship with Jonathan. And this is going to become so important in what I'm about to say soon concerning Jonathan, because David's honor just continues to amaze me. And because he kept his word. An honorable person is one who keeps his word. Okay? So look what he says. And it came to pass this day, chapter 2, 2 Samuel chapter 2, all right? It says, And it came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord, shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said unto him, go up. And David said, whither shall I go up? And he said, unto Hebron. Hebron, I did a complete teaching series on Hebron. Hebron means covenant joining. It would be at, I'm getting ahead. Hebron is a place of covenant joining. And it says, and his men that were with him, verse 3, did David bring up every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah, and they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. So in other words, guess what happens at Hebron? At Hebron, David would be anointed king. It would be at Hebron that the nation would come together under the sovereign rule of the Lord through David. Okay, Hebron, place of covenant joining. That's why Hebron really was a higher point than Zion, because everything in the body of Christ is by covenant joining. It says this in 2 Samuel chapter 3. Now, after the death of Saul, there was a long war. 2 Samuel chapter 3. It says, now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. Okay? So there was this battle in Israel between the two houses. But David did not let that battle deter him from being an honorable king. Okay? Because the house of Saul continued to wax weaker and weaker. Now, there was a son. This is the good part. There was a son that Jonathan had. His name is Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan. And here's what David said. He went look. He's like, is there anybody in the house of Saul that is worthy of me to be kind to? David looked to be kind to those of the house of Saul. He sought to make peace, but he also sought to show his kindness, his spirit of honor, his spirit of recognizing their importance to the corporate nation of Israel. Okay? He says this, 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4, and Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame of his feet. He was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul and Jonathan out of Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it came to pass, as she made haste to flee, and he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth, okay? So he was 5 years old where his nurse was carrying him. We know 5 is the number of grace, right? His nurse was carrying him, tripped and fell, and then basically paralyzed him at the legs, okay? And so David continued to look for this son of Jonathan, okay? Remember, he had a covenant relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan said he would be by his side when he would become king. Jonathan would strengthen David's hand, the Lord, when he was in the wilderness, saying, I will be next to you. I will serve you. That was the thing. And David promised that he would never forget Jonathan. He would always keep Jonathan. Well, here's his opportunity. Let's look at chapter 5, 2 Samuel. It says this. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David at Hebron. Remember what I said. And spake, saying, behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in times past, when Saul was king over us, thou was he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said to thee, thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders, follow it, and all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron. And King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel at Hebron. Watch this. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. What's the picture of that? At 30 years old, the number 30 is the number of maturity, and 40 years reign would be a years of testing, okay? It says this, in Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years, 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. We know 33 was also the age of Jesus when he was crucified. I don't know why I couldn't get that. When he was crucified, he was buried, and he was what? Resurrected. Okay. So Mephibosheth, David's son, David says, I want to recognize the house of Saul. 2 Samuel chapter 9 says, and David said, is there yet any that is left in the house of Saul that I might show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was the house of Saul, the servant whose name was Ziba. Verse 3, and the king said, is there not yet any of the house of Saul that I may show kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan has yet a son which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel in Lodebar. And then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodebar. Now, watch this. Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, behold thy servant. And David said unto him, fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. Do you see that? David welcomed Mephibosheth. He said, you shall eat at my table continually. Why? Because he had a covenant with Jonathan, and he honored his word. Even though Jonathan was dead, he took care of Jonathan's son. And he said, you shall eat at my table, and I'm going to restore unto you all the lands of your father Saul. David didn't have to do that. But the honor of David, the honorable person he is, recognized that and says, no, I'm giving you back your father's land. And that was all because of the covenant bond that he had with his father, Jonathan. Okay? He skips down, verse number 10. Verse number 9, it says, then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul, and to all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. He said it again, Mephibosheth shall not leave my table. He shall eat with me continually. A son that finds grace and honors grace shall continually eat at the Lord's table. He shall continually fellowship with the Lord. Watch this. And Mephibosheth, verse 12, and Mephibosheth had a son whose name was Micah. And all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both his feet. Mephibosheth didn't have to do anything. He served, but all of what belonged to his father's father was given to him by King David, because King David was an honorable man. And this is what made David such a special person. He knew how to submit to authority. He knew how to operate by faith. He understood what it meant to operate in meekness in the face of wayward leadership. But most of all, he honored authority. Even in the face of that authority trying to actively hunt him and kill him, he still honored that authority, even in death. Even in death. David then restored unto the house of Saul everything that belonged to him through a covenant relationship that he had with Saul's son Jonathan. And he made sure Jonathan's son and the house of Saul was well taken care of. That is an honorable man and one who we could model. We need to learn to be a more honorable people, and we need to learn how to serve those who have been given the grace of God to help bring us to maturity in these days. We need to serve. See, Mephibosheth saw himself as just a dog, and a dog is one of the lowest things you could be. But he says, no, you're a son of my beloved friend, my beloved brother, and I will help take care of you and restore to you all that was lost. What a beautiful, beautiful man. So we talk about why David was a man after God's own heart. This is why. Because he was a submitted king. He was a submitted and humbled person. He was a meek man. He was a man of faith. He remembered the promises of God. He lived by the promises of God. But most of all, he was an honorable man. An honorable man. And he showed that honor in how he lived. He showed how to move by wisdom. That's David, y'all. There's so much that we need to change in our own lives to line up with who David was before he became king. Before he became king, he was so honorable. Look how he wept over Saul. Look how he told the whole nation and even Judah to do what? To mourn the loss of Saul. He called the nation to fast and to sing the song of the bow out of the book of Jasher. Didn't have to do that, but that's the honor that David had. And that's why Jesus said what? Love your enemies. Even those who were enemies. He said David still looked at him as God's anointed because he was king over Israel. That's a large step for us. That's a large step to mourn our enemies and the death of our enemies, and even death of leadership, especially wayward leadership that sought to do us harm. So I urge y'all this day, it's time for us, we got to stop talking about trying to be like David and actually put that into play. He was a submissive man, a humble man, a faithful man, a man of meekness, but most of all, a man of honor. So may God bless you till we meet again on the Journey to Sonship podcast.